Welcome to the video. I'm going to show you how to change the spark plugs and the ignition coil yourself on this 2015 Corsa Design. Firstly, head over to the passenger side and pull the bonnet release onto the dashboard. And then go ahead and carefully lift the bonnet and secure it on a strut. Make sure you have the correct quantity of your spark plugs with you or the ignition coil for your car, and make sure to check the manual beforehand. Locate the engine cover. It has two plugs securing the bottom half and two plugs at the top. So go ahead and lift the bottom, and then you should be able to swing it to see where the two top plugs are located. Once you've located them, firmly pull to remove the engine cover. Right away you can see the ignition coil pack, and it also has a power cable attached on the right hand side. Use a flathead screwdriver to unsecure the clip as shown, and then simultaneously shake and release the clip and the plug at the same time in order to remove the power lead. Once it's detached, you can put it to the side and start working on the long screws holding the ignition in place. I believe it's a T30 torque screw. They come off very easily by hand, so no need to use a power drill. Next part is a little bit tricky. Make sure to firmly pull from all sides. There are 4 ignition coils on the other end that plugs directly onto the spark plugs. Use a flathead screwdriver to help lift, but be careful not to use excessive force. Once you feel that it's almost off, use the chance now to clean off any surrounding dirt so it doesn't fall into the engine once you remove the spark plugs. You can then slowly pull off the ignition coil, and if that's what you need to replace, then go ahead and make sure you compare the new part before reinstalling it. You can now clearly see where the spark plugs are, and we can now move on to removing them. I'm using a 17mm socket head with an extension. You can initially loosen it a little using a ratchet, and from there onwards by hand will do. Loosen all 4 spark plugs carefully. Once they're all loose, I'm going to use a small plier to actually remove them. You can also use a spark plug wrench or a long nose plier for this. Just a firm hold will do, no need to grip it a lot. Make sure not to damage these spark plugs, just in case any of the newer ones are damaged or misfiring. You can keep the old ones in for a short time till you manage to get them replaced. Carefully proceed to lift out all the spark plugs. Once all of them are removed, cover the area using an engine cover so no dirt falls back in. You can see the state of the old spark plugs here. They are fairly corroded. When replacing spark plugs, it's important to change them all at the same time. Unless, of course, as I mentioned earlier, if the new one has been damaged or is misfiring. This means that all 4 of them will have a similar lifetime. As always, compare the old ones to the new ones to make sure they are the same. Working backwards, carefully install the new spark plugs. Take your time with this and make sure not to damage them. Once they're all in, use the long extension with the 17mm socket head and tighten it by hand. It's important you do this by hand, do not use a power drill. Once they're pretty much tightened by hand, you can then go ahead and use a ratchet. You can see here all these spark plugs are vertically installed and it looks good so far. Before installing the ignition coil back in, quickly clean it off with a brush. Make sure the dirt doesn't fall back into the coil. Insert the ignition coil vertically in place and then give it a firm push. You can then insert those 2 long screws by hand and use a ratchet to tighten it. Once it's done, you can see it's very firm and doesn't shake, so it looks good so far. Attach the power lead back in carefully and secure the clip as shown. Finally, start the car, listen to the engine and make sure it's not misfiring. In this case, there are no warning signs, it looks like we replaced them successfully. Let's go back and reinstall the engine cover. Put those rotating clips at the back first, and then firmly push down on the bottom too. Before shutting the bonnet, make sure to check you haven't left any tools inside. I also quickly went ahead and cleaned up some trips of the engine bay with a degreaser. If you have an OBD, quickly check for any fault codes. Otherwise, you've changed the spark plugs successfully. Thank you for watching.